Alright guys, I'm here. Let's go. Welcome back, friends. We're going to jump in. We are going to talk about some stuff that came out on Free RPG Day. We are talking about two in particular. We are talking about Plaguebearer, which came out. I do not believe the full role-playing game is out. I think it's something else. I don't think it's quite out yet. But you know what? We can figure that out very quickly. And we're also looking at All Bets Are Off, which is a little adventure for everyday heroes. Evil Genius Games. Plaguebearer is put out by Edge Studios. I figured, let me just go ahead and look at Edge Studios while I'm thinking about it. Let's jump over here real quick. And pull this up and we'll take a look at it. So we're going to look at that, tell you about my first impressions looking at it and how I feel about these systems and whether they're going to go into my, am I going to play this kind of pile, or this like, yeah, this was neat, or maybe this is something I will crop for something else, but probably not going to be a go-to thing for me. It's something I really want to try out. So, what did I say? They're put out by Edge. Edge put out another thing that we looked at previously, which was Dungeons and Kittens, which was something that really did surprise me. But look, go ahead and look. I can't remember if the Plaguebearer one is fully out. Yes, I guess so, because now they have the, well, this is for Zombicide, which is different. All right, let's oh, these are projects. So let's go to out of video. Won't take a pitch. Okay, that one just takes us to, hey, do you want to? Yeah, here. All right, our games. Look at our games. Dungeons and Kittens, which we already looked at. On Midnight, Star Wars, Legend of the Five Rings, Genesis system, which what thing of? Oh, so just Plaguebearer not fully out. Just the preview book, it seems like. So just the preview book is out right now. Then I guess this is the Game Found is kind of like their Kickstarter kind of thing for Plaguebearer for an update stuff. So that should tell you a lot about what we're going to be looking at today. So remember that when we start talking about the things, that this is kind of a, we're looking at a more of a beta kind of thing. It's not fully out yet. Our update, this was the update from 426. Okay. So from back in April. All right. Keep that in mind as we talk about things. So let's go to Free RPG. So let's, which one do we want to talk about first? I guess we can talk about, you know what? Which one do I have written down? Which one's first in my notes? Let's just do it that way. Which is Plaguebearer. So we'll go directly into Plaguebearer. That's totally fine. All right, so Plaguebearer. So this is not a game about hiding from the dead. In Plaguebearer, you play as a tough, sword-wielding, spell-casting, zombie-killing scoundrel. Can you survive the world's undeadliest fantasy RPG? So Plaguebearer, it comes from is kind of a fork of the Zombicide board games. If you've never played one of them, that they are kind of a little bit more kind of Walking Dead style, I would think, kind of games. I think that's kind of the original Survivor modern day zombie apocalypse thing. Plaguebearer is now this full RPG. Those were board games. This is now an RPG that's focused specifically in sort of the Black Death times during the plague, and people, necromancers who are converting them to undead, and now undead prowl, and in many places outnumber the living. So it's become kind of a new situation that's going on. And I think that's all we need to look on this page at this point. So that is kind of the setup. And so, again, put out by Edge Studios, who made Dungeons and Kittens, which we looked at, as well as the Genesis system, which is used for like Star Wars and other. I have the Genesis dice back behind me. I'm not going to grab them. They're funky looking dice with a bunch of symbols on them. You need to know. Alright, so what was I expecting when I was looking at this, and I talked about it a little bit when we did a little bit of a preview of the free RPG materials. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. This was one that was kind of lower on my list. I was like, I've already got kind of a fantasy RPG go-to with D&D, as well as there are plenty of other options if you're not a fan specifically of D&D in that system. It will suffice for fantasy RPG. Being the most common, I would say, genre of tabletop RPGs, being the original and kind of building out from that and being the most popular one, there are a lot of things that are in that same milieu. So what is this going to do that's going to separate it and put it apart and think about why would I want to pick it up? That. So one was I already had kind of a passing familiarity with the Zombicide system. Like I think I played one game of it forever ago. And I was like, oh, Zombie Apocalypse is fun stuff. I haven't played a Zombie Apocalypse thing here in a bit. And I was, I look at the cover of this and I'm like, okay, it's got a very, what I would call comic book style to it. So with that, it's giving me this idea that's like, oh, this is going to be a very straightforward, like, power fantasy game that's about, like, cutting through, like, swathes of mindless undead. And I assume the combat, based off of kind of the front illustration, the way that they talk about it being a zombie killing scoundrel, that the biggest part about this is going to be the combat. Going to be the biggest part of the game, and probably not as much on the resource management, scavenging, kind of exploration. So like I didn't think that this was going to be a game where you're going to be trying to do like a lot of stealth or misdirection or trying to sneak around. It's mostly like kick down doors, kill undead kind of game. So those were kind of my expectations going into this. So what did I actually get out of it? Well, one of the things that stuck me from the very beginning is that, and I know this will not come across on screen, is that, but we can look at the comparison. So this is All Bets Are Off. As you can tell, it's got a very glossy cover on it. And most things that come out on like free RPG Day do have a glossy style cover like. But this one has very much like a broadsheet. It has no difference in the cover as the interior pages. It has this very sort of broadsheet, pulpy still kind of feel to it. So it's got a nice, it's got a very nice texture to it. But it is probably not built to super last. That tends to be what you get with paper like this. But it is different, and that was interesting, which means that might have been more of an economical decision, which is perfectly fine. Some things like this make sense, and we're going to talk about it here in a second. You'll understand why this outer cover is like this. But a lot of them that have this outer cover, similar style of outer cover, that's very, very like cut and can be sharp. This one's not too sharp. Can be sharp edges. But often don't have the reasoning as to why this one has the glossy finish on it. Kind of almost laminated kind of style finish on it. So it was interesting, and I like that. If that's what is the difference maker, whether you decide to do like full color or not on the interior, I'm like, yeah, go for the full color. Now, looking through the interior, there is artwork in here. Like, there is artwork in here. But I was like, you could have probably gotten away with not doing 4-color on the interior. Like, pages like this. Like, it's nice to have color on it, especially on these border images, but do you need them? I probably could have used straight up black and white. Would have been fine. Like, even ones like this that do have some art on them. I'm like, hey, still probably could have gotten away with black and white. But otherwise, really like it, like the design of it. I really, really enjoy little border guys. I'll talk about those a little more, but they're little border images that are give this kind of illuminated manuscript medieval kind of feel to it, and it's all about people who are dealing with the undead from various walks of life in different ways. So you have people hitting them with axes and maces and setting them on fire, cleansing them with what looks like holy spells, perhaps. It's very fun. I like it. It's very evocative. Makes me definitely kind of get me in that Black Plague mindset a little. Very useful. And what I'll say is that I already talked about it a little bit, but that stock setting idea of being like, hey, you know, there's the Black Death, so there's a bunch of people who died. Very significant portion of the population of quasi Western Europe, untyped Western Europe, have died, and there are necromancers who are bringing them back to life. Because that's what necromancers do, and we don't really have any more information about that. So as far as it's just like, this is just the stock story. So when I read stuff like that, I'm like, okay, so I'm getting the vibe very early on that this is a situation, and I think this is what the game's going for, that you are not going to cure this situation, which makes it a very different situation than something like Tomb of Annihilation. It's like, oh, you're going there to stop the situation. This is like, nope, there's not really a lot you can do about the situation. You are just trying to survive in the new world order, this new setup that you have, where, hey, lots of people are dead, there's nobody really like worked the farms, and like, what are you gonna do? How are you going to survive it? And a lot of that survival will depend on your ability to fight the undead, to get where you need to go, to grab resources, things. So it's got this very much the setup of like, hey, there's a zombie apocalypse, we got swords, and we're gonna have this scavenger murder hobo style of gameplay where the idea, and I think that the intro adventure that they give us is the night hunt. Name of this thing called? Yeah. It is called Night Hunt. I remembered it. Night Hunt does kind of set it up that way and be like, oh, you guys are people who are just going through the area because you're looking for resources because you're out of food. That's pretty much the setup for the adventure. And you stumble across this story, this event that is happening, and you take part in it. Mainly because it's important for you. Because it has the opportunity to provide you for food, something that you're desperately in need of. So it does kind of, so that, I think that'll tell you very quickly whether that is a style of game that you want to play or not. Do you want to have a beer and pretzels kind of game where you kick down doors, you kill zombies, and you go to the next zombie infested area next week? If not, if you're wanting something that's like, oh, how do we set up a base or something like that? Now, I can't say for certain because I've only looked at the quick start stuff, but I'm getting the idea that that is probably not the mode of play that this game is particularly interested in doing. I don't think that, like, I think Plaguebearer is going to have some stuff for you if you want to set up some sort of like base of operations or some little stronghold or some like a bastion style kind of thing. Like, I think they will probably have some amount of rules for that. But I don't think that that is going to be primarily a large part of the gameplay experience. I think this is going to be relatively minor. So keep that in mind. Oh, let me talk about how does the system actually play. So it is a tri-stat system. You have muscle, brains, and guts. Is that right? Muscle, brain, and guts. So 3 stats. So that's very familiar. And if you're familiar with the tri-stat RPGs, usually you have a physical trait. Usually you have some sort of mental trait, and then you have some sort of like willpower or wisdom, and wisdom kind of falls under brains. Some sort of like things that with like charisma would fall under or presence, or like I said, willpower, will kind of thing. Often it's the thing that steps in and is useful for casting magic in a lot of those kinds of tri-stat systems is usually what that third stat's for. As well as, you know, avoiding things like being feared or like taking heart and morale and stuff like that. So each of those 3 abilities are combined with 6 proficiencies, which are athletics, combat, magic, perception, survival, and wit. So kind of these modes of gameplay. Like, are you doing combat? You're going to be using stuff under the combat heading. If you're going to do magic, you're going to be doing stuff under the magic heading. If you're trying to do athletics, you're doing stuff under the athletics heading. Perception, you're doing stuff under the perception heading. So unlike a game like D&D where perception is a single ability skill roll, this is like, no, this is, depending on what you're doing, might be 3 kind of separate rolls. And so what it does is it creates, and why I'm looking at this, is that on your character sheet you will have a table like this, where you have 3 columns and 6 rows, and they combine to make 18 types of checks that you will make while playing the game. That are pretty much all the checks that you will be making in the game when you're rolling dice. It's nice because it kind of gives this blend of class-based system and skill-based system game design, so it's interesting to see it broken up like that. Like that kind of thing, I'm like, oh, this is kind of neat. I kind of enjoyed this. Now, I'm also gonna say, you know, with that said, the 18 proficiencies are, my estimation, not super intuitive. Like, let me look for an example. So, survival plus guts is what you roll for your stealth check. Okay, why is it my guts stat? And the other things under survival are scavenge and craft. And I was like, you could probably make an argument to swap all of those around for almost every other stat. Like, you could be like, scavenge is under muscle, is like you're physically doing something. But scavenging could be brains, being able to tell what is worth picking up and carrying with you and what's not. That could very much be a brains check. Could it be a guts check? Maybe. Guts is kind of that weird outlier where, look at the actual definition of guts. It will tell us. I believe. Yeah, temperamental profile of your survivor is what guts is for. So your kind of temperament. So things that are like, is this worth the time to scavenge or not? Like, oh, this is a lot of work. I'm not sure if that's worth the time, or will I get frustrated, or I'll make too much noise, or something like that. So I could see that being under that. So that to say is that not all 18 make a ton of sense when you look at them. So I feel like if I was trying to run this, which I'm going to, I'd be like, oh, system mastery with this is going to require what I feel like is rote memorization. That those are the 2 things that make this check. And again, you don't actually have to memorize it because it's right there in the table. But when you're probably doing things like trying to build out adventures, or trying to, when the players want to do something that you're not prepared for and you need to improvise what checks might be, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of what checks are what. And so I feel like mastery of the system requires you to just rote memorize them, because not all of them make a lot of super intuitive sense. Now, I did say that this felt like very much like a power fantasy, or that was my expectation when I was going into it. I will say that there are some interesting things I like. Like, there is a strain resource mechanic, which is you spend boxes of strain in the same way that you would spend things like mana or spell slots. And you can do that to do a number of things, depending on what type of character you're playing. But one of the more common ones to do it is to push a roll. Okay, where is deck? They're forcing successes. Because you can gain 1 strain point to 4 successes. And you black out 1 dot on the fatigue track. So when you do that, the pool system works like this. With the D6 pulls, is you need to roll 6s to be successes. So depending on what you need, what you're trying to do, you might only need 1 success. Sometimes you might need 2 or 3 successes. Being able to force successes means that when you roll 5s, if you spend a point of strain, you can convert those 5s into 6s. So it gives you this ability to push the roll, which is very common in dice pool systems, as a way to kind of like push yourself to get more successes. Usually it's some sort of detriment. Sometimes you don't know what that detriment's going to be. So anybody who's played Call of Cthulhu is going to be very familiar with like pushing a roll and those kinds of aspects, though that mechanic's very, very different. But the idea is the same, is that you're trying to... I wasn't going to be successful, or I was only going to be slightly successful, and I want to be more successful at what I'm doing. So you use this push. There's also the lower HP totals, which makes things a lot more dangerous. Like looking back at our pre-gens, which on the opposite page have nice big illustrations, which are very nice. But they have 4, 6, 5, 6 hit points. So you're not gonna be able to take a lot of hits from these guys when you're playing around. So you do need to be careful about that. So it helps for me, instead of making it full power fantasy all the time in the way that D&D is, like there is that lower HP and having that strain resource mechanic. Outside of that, when you hit certain thresholds in the strain mechanic, you start taking negative dice penalties to what you roll. So you lose dice out of your pool. So you have this stuff that you're trying to balance with you. And if you spend too much of that stuff, it's real bad real quick. So I like it does that to kind of keep some of that gritty tone that you expect from a zombie apocalypse kind of game. Other mechanics I like the fervor mechanic. So fervor is on each of these character sheets. Start out with 1 benefit of fervor, like one of these, the talent set. Each one. So this is Yusuf. Yusuf starts out with he started out with 1 and 3 always going. He has inner eye. Your sense and ward action rolls are favored. So favored rolls, and every character has about 1 usually, I think, for most of them, as a favored roll. On a favored roll, you can push that roll for free. You don't have to spend strain to do it. So that means that mechanically what it means is that when you make those rolls, 5s are also successes for you. You have a 1 in 3 chance rather than a 1 in 6 chance to be successful on any die roll. So his talent is like when you do these 2 action rolls, those are also favored for. That's nice. And then then there are conditions, and when you meet the conditions, you get to unlock a different fervor thing. So one of the fervor gains is when you get a critical strike, which is when you have 2 or 3 successes, I believe, more than the target number you're going for. When that happens, you can unlock 1, and the other one is first blood, is whenever you take your first hit point of damage, and you are no longer at max health. So you should be picking those up pretty quickly, at least one of them. And then you can choose whichever one in whichever order you want to do it. So for Yusuf, you have Fortitude. When you gain Fervor, you cancel all gain strain. So he has a cool thing, so you'll probably want to save that for later. Till the end, when you're like, oh, maybe I'm taking a -1, maybe a -2, you can take up to -3 dice in your pool to roll that for strain to max out your strain track. So if you do that and you wait till the end, and you can use your Fortitude to regain all that fervor or all that strain, and then you can start spending it again, which is really nice. And the other one is Archer's Blessing. If you roll 3 sixes, when you're attacking with a ranged weapon, you add 3 hits to your final result. So those immediately translate over to damage. That makes your crits even crittier. I believe, yeah, I think 3 successes is a crit. And so each character and their like kind of class or archetype has a different style, has different stuff that they do in that talents or fervor action. It's really, really cool. I really like that. Other parts about the book, some of the organization is really weird. Like there are areas where it will introduce a concept right at the top of a section, then be like, and we're not going to explain this part. You need to go to a different area on a few pages too. And that I feel like there's a good example in here pretty early on. Kind of sends me for a little explanation. You know what? I think I don't spend too much time just like reading down it, but there are sections in there that are like that. Or it will introduce something under a heading and then be like, now you need to go to a different page to check it out. Which is not terrible, but it does make you kind of have to do a lot of flipping when you're trying to learn the game. You're kind of flipping constantly through different sections of this booklet rather than just kind of reading it straight through to learn the game. And that's also not helped by mistakes that are in this document. Like I said, now knowing that the core rulebook is for sure not out, we need to trying to give them a little bit of grace on this. But in here, at the like pre-press proofread, they made a pretty big mistake, which is that after they cemented what the layout was going to be for this, they did not go back in and replace the placeholders for the page number references. So there are no page number references in here. So when it has a section, it's like, oh, turn to page, and it literally says in here XX to learn about this thing. You're like, great, what page is XX? And yes, that's 20 in Roman numerals, but it's not numbered that way. So it was placeholder text that never got cemented after the layout had been finalized. So it does make it even harder to kind of like go through that. That's kind of a major printing flub. And I do want to say that that's not just in the printed version. I went and looked at the digital PDF of it too, and it still has those same issues in it. Currently, or at least the last time they looked at it still had it. So maybe they've updated it by now, but I doubt they have. So keep that in mind, that there is some of that. And part of that includes like there's some poor explanation of some things and kind of confusing. Like they don't really do a good job of talking about how individual adversaries and group adversaries are different, because there are 2 different types of adversary like that, as their way to sort of like manage what hordes of zombies are like. But they don't really do a good job of telling you very clearly what the differences in them is. This is one of the areas where I was like, if they had provided something like a table that just had, this is individual adversary, this is group adversary, this is how walkers and runners are different, this is how creatures with HP work differently than adversaries that don't have HP in them. Been really helpful, like just having a single table that lays out those differences. And there are plenty of tables in the book. There are tables in the book, so it's not as though they didn't know how to make tables. I'm just saying that would be extremely helpful for trying to learn the game as a game master and trying to run it for people. And we don't really have that support there. We'll talk a little bit more about lack of that support a little bit, but that's going to be a little bit, I want to save some of that stuff that was a little bit more surprising for me later on. In general, in addition to being a D6 pool, class-based, tri-stat kind of RPG, Plaguebearer is another RPG where the game master doesn't roll dice. It's really nice as far as getting into it and learning a system when you don't have to also worry about doing all the rolling as well. It's just like either they pass or they fail, and you know what they do, something happens. And so it's very easy. It takes some of that brain work out from you as a game master, but it's not my preferred style. It is a personal taste, but I'm just like, part of the fun of TTRPGs is getting to use the math rocks, is getting to roll the dice, and I like to be able to roll the dice with my friends. I feel that game master is a player too, and I want to roll the dice in my dice rolling game. Even though I'm playing the world, it's like I kind of still want to do the one physical action we get to do as a part of the game. Also, what am I gonna do with all my pretty dice if I don't roll them? Fortunate. Feels bad. It feels weird every time that I run a game like this when I sit down, and unlike when I'm running D&D or something else, and I get out, you know, my dice tray and my dice bag and get all the stuff out and do my pre-rolls, trying to figure out which of the guys are gonna roll well today, which of the guys are gonna roll bad today, and sort through them, kind of do that pre-game ritual and get all my stuff set out in front of me. And then I sit down to play a game like this or run a game like this, and I'm like, oh, right, I don't actually need any of that stuff out. And I don't do any of that pre-game ritual kind of thing. It just, I don't know, it feels like it kind of puts me on the back foot. Like something feels not quite right about it, almost. About it. You know, ritual is important. Whether you believe that rolling out the dice makes a difference, I don't even really believe that. It's just a thing I do now. I didn't used to do it, but sometimes I just got used to doing it. I was just like, oh, it's just a fun way to roll the dice, and it gives me this sort of idea that I have some sort of agency in the dice roll, which is not true, and I know that, but I don't know. It's fun. It also helps me because I know that there is one die in my die set that is real 20 heavy. It crits a lot, and there's one specific die that does it. That is just, I guess, slightly off weight, but the funny thing is that all my dice are the same color. Like, all my d20s are the same color. They're all gray with red numbering, and I've got 6 of them. And so I'm not sure which one it is at any time. So the pre-roll also usually doesn't tell me either. Usually I just have to find it by happenstance while I'm rolling. Usually I'll roll a crit and be like, oh, that's probably the crit die then, because I tend to not crit very often. Which, you know, players like, but me as a player, I'd like to crit a little. That'd be nice. Other things that are going on in this. The rush of combat is cool. So I talked about strain and the penalties on strain. So all those negatives don't apply during combat. They only apply to rolls that you make outside of combat, which is a very interesting distinction. And I like that idea. So this idea that, like, when the adrenaline kicks in, you don't have to worry about those negatives aspects of it. It's just you're fighting for your life at that point. So I like that. It feels very thematic to me. I like it. And it does give you this idea that it's okay to spend strain pretty liberally in combat if it's going to keep you alive, because it won't matter if you have negatives to outside of combat if you don't make it through the combat. So it's not more likely to get your player character killed in the combat, but they will have that suffering to performing once they get outside of combat, which feels very much like fatigue. Like, I feel like that makes sense. Like, you're just mentally and physically exhausted once that adrenaline wears off. So I like it. It has this very, we're gonna use the big word, that ludonarrative resonance. Like, it's like, oh, the gameplay matches what the fiction of that scene is. And I like that aspect. That's really, really good game design. But that said, I feel like it would be really easy to forget that those penalties don't apply during combat. Because I don't think that it's noted anywhere on the character sheet. Double check, but I don't think it's noted. It is not noted on the character sheet. So that would probably be nice to do. Be like, hey, by the way, also, these penalties don't apply while you're in combat. I think that would be a little bit of a helpful, especially for like these pre-gen first one-off characters. This is probably the people who are playing this, it's their first time playing the system. So remembering this thing that you might otherwise not remember. And I also really like there is a world map on the inside cover. Not here, but on the back. So it's a little bit of a truncated map, so it's not the full world map, but it kind of gives you the idea, and it shows you the area that the adventure takes place in, which is, I mean, it's somewhere around this red line that goes across. We start off in the wheat fields, and you can move up into the Wolfwood. But it doesn't give us any specifics, and there aren't like any little village names or anything on that. Like, it's very much a symbolic map and not like a cartographic map. It's giving us a lot of detailed information. We're worried about like accuracy. More of a vibes map. So let's talk about some things that did surprise me. I talked a little bit about the illuminated border illustrations. Those were fun for me. I like that kind of stuff. It's a little bit of extra, like, they didn't need to add this stuff on the sides. Like, that stuff doesn't help them. In fact, it makes the book longer because they're taking up quite a bit of page space by having it in there. So you have to add extra pages to the book to get all the information in there. But it goes a long way into telling you kind of about reinforce that vibe or feeling of the game. And I like that. It's giving us that. Other things that I found were really supplying. It deals with kind of encumbrance in your gear slots in a very interesting way. I just jumped into it. You keep track of any weapons and items your survivor can carry, and that's what they call the PCs, are survivors. Using the inventory slots on your survivor folio, you can use the 3 baldric and 2 belt spaces to carry the gear you want to keep handy. So you have 5 slots that are like on you that are like ready access slots. After that, you have 6 stack slots that are used to track anything that you carry around in a satchel or bag. During combat, you cannot access the gear you carry in a sack. So I really like that distinction to be like, oh, you have 5 slots that's going to include like your weapons and your spell scrolls and all that kind of stuff. Plus, if you had, you know, I'm sure they're probably in the game, though they're not in the quick start, like something like a healing potion, or, you know, if you wanted to swap out spell scrolls or something like that, because each one of those takes an inventory slot. You don't just get like one big wizard book. You have like individual spell slot. There's spell scrolls that you cast off of. So, you know, you have to start thinking about what are the things that I want on hand all the time, especially if combat breaks out. And anything else goes in the sack. Most items occupy 1 inventory slot, so you have that very Pathfinder kind of style where it's just like most things are 1 inventory slot, some things are more than that, some things are fewer than that, some of them are like minor objects, and like 10 of those equal 1 inventory slot. And I like that system. I've always been a big fan of it. It is a little noodly. I first encountered it playing Starfinder, and I really like that. That's the first place I came across it, at first edition Starfinder, and I was like, oh, I really like this. It's not the same as doing weight-based, which it's better than weight-based, but it still is a little noodly especially if you're trying to track it by hand and you're not using a automated character sheet that's going to take care of that for you. But it's still manageable by hand. So most items are 1 inventory slot. Large objects or items are particularly heavy, may occupy 2 slots or more instead. See gear on page XX. Well, I am on the section under gear, so I don't know where I'd roll to learn more about gear. What page I'd flip to learn more about gear. Now it says that, but there is in fact in the adventure supplies that you get that take in fact 3 inventory slots, which is fine because our survivors barely have anything on them, but that takes up like half their sack spaces. It takes up like half their backpack. So you can kind of keep that as an idea of like, oh, this must be quite a bit of supplies then. There is also a custom initiative deck for this game. Obviously, they don't expect you to have that for the quick start. So they have you use a deck of cards, but instead of a kind of a standard deck of cards, let me get to the section. Instead of using like a standard deck of cards, they actually have you pull most of the cards out. And you'll in fact use a number of face cards that represent the survivors, your player characters. And so you have to remember which face card is yours. So you got to write that down on your character sheet. Then you will use the 8 of spades, the 9 of spades and the 9 of clubs, the 10 of spades, and the ace of spades and the ace of clubs. The 8 of spades represents walkers. Those are like your bog standard zombies. The 9s represent the runners, which are the fast zombies. The 10 of spades represents the brutes, which are like your big old ogre zombies. They're hard to take down. They got a lot of toughness. And abominations, which are like the super special kind of villain big boss monster ones. And they get 2 ace cards. So you'll notice that some of them get single cards and some of them get multiple cards. My interpretation of this, again, because like I said, it's not super clear, is that the walkers, which are the 8, gets the 8 of spades. That they say this initiative card is for one crowd of walkers. So that to me is a group adversary. The runners, there are 2 cards, they represent 2 runners, so they represent 2 individual adversaries. The 10 of spades represents brutes. It says 1 brutes, so if it's 1 brutes, is that 1 individual adversary or 1 group of brutes? Because you're using the plural. It's also helpful knowing. So the game is not, the core rules aren't out yet. Also, this appears, as far as I could tell, or maybe I made it up. Perhaps I have made it up. And if I have made it up, then I'm not going to say that because I don't know that. Alright, then I'm not going to say that. What I will say is that like some of those things like that are weird. And like 2 abomination cards, like, okay, so that must mean that there are 2 separate abominations. In fact, no, there is 1 abomination, but abominations have a bunch of extra special rules that they follow in Plaguebearer, so they actually get multiple, like a legendary action, they get multiple actions within a round of combat, and that's how they balance that out. But again, some of this stuff is like I'm really having to reach and deduce a lot of that information because it's not being presented to me in the written form in the game explicitly. Like I'm having to make that up. And that to say is that I think that the Initiative Sin deck is really gimmicky. They clearly want you to buy their own custom initiative deck, and they pretty much say that. Yeah, the complete rules includes a custom deck of initiative cards. And then it's like, this is how you do that. And I'm like, is this any better than doing just straight up normal rolled initiative or a different type of card-based initiative? I don't really think so. I don't think it's necessarily better. I think, if anything, it's a little bit more confusing. It also doesn't tell you explicitly. This is one of the things where I talk about some of the communication style is kind of weird in it. And shows kind of, in a lot of ways, a lack of expert technical writing. And technical writing is really, really important in RPG handbooks. It is the thing that's like about being clear and concise in communication. And there's some stuff, we haven't come across it yet, but there is one example in the stuff that came out that I picked up for Free RPG Day this year that has, its technical writing is so good. At no point when I'm reading through it am I ever confused about what's going on in the game. In Plaguebearer, unfortunately, when I'm reading through it, there are a lot of places where I'm like, wait, what? What is this referring to? I have to kind of like, I've read through this like twice now, and it's like, oh, now I think I can deduce how these things make a little bit more sense. So I don't think that the initiative system adds a little bit more, and I compare that to what is the most common card-based initiative system for me, which is Savage Worlds, which uses just a standard 52 card playing deck plus the 2 jokers, so 54 cards. And that is both an homage to its history, because Savage Worlds started as the Deadlands RPG, which is a Wild West themed one, so they use, of course, a poker deck for initiative. But also there's like all these talents and perk style feats that you take that allow you to manipulate the initiative deck and what you can do with it. And it also has cool things like the Joker in Savage Worlds. If you draw a Joker on your initiative, you get to go whenever you want. It's the cool thing that happens with it. And that includes interrupting other people's turns. You can go in the middle of somebody else's turn. It can be one of your teammates. It can be an adversary's. At any time you can go, nope, I'm going right now. I'm going to do my initiative right now. And everything stops and you immediately start your turn. But, you know, there's only 2 Joker cards in the entire 54 card deck, so they don't come up that often. But there are perks you take, like being able to draw 2 or more initiative cards and take whichever one you want. As opposed to like a 5e thing where you might have advantage on initiative check. It's a very different system. So when I think about like those kind of cool initiative things that do those sorts of things, then I look at this and this is just like, oh, it's just kind of a custom deck just because it can be. Makes me go, oh, this just seems like a weird way to sell another product for the game that isn't really necessary for the game. And like I said, with the explicitly, the explicit style of the rules, let's go that way. The explicit style of the rules and the lack of that in the writing is that it doesn't tell you that, hey, it's round-based initiative. So at the end of the round, you're going to shuffle all the cards and deal them back out again. But that will be implicit once you're sitting there doing it at the table, because at the end of the round, you're going to be like, well, there aren't any cards to draw, so we have to shuffle them and deal them back out. But it would be nice if it just said that in the rule. So I wasn't there, because there could be somebody who sits there and goes, wait, so is this just our initiative round forever, or do we reshuffle them? Or so did I need to write down the initiative because I didn't write down the initiative and now we're at the end of the round? There are lots of things that you look at that way. There's like, it could be, the technical writing could be better around this. And more omissions of stuff in here, like I talked about having to deduce a lot of information and some of the stuff that kind of came up about the different types of adversaries. Let me show it to you. I think this is important to know about this. This guy, this is the Night Hunter Abomination. This is our custom Abomination enemy for the short adventure. This is the only stat block we get in the quick start. We don't get, so remember that we had runners and brutes and walker zombies and stuff like that. We don't have stat blocks for them. That makes things difficult. How do I run the game that's mostly focused on combat if I don't have stat blocks for the bad guys? That's going to be hard to do. And so, like, this is one of the reasons why I was like, I'm going to try to run this with my group as a one-shot and be like, can I just figure out what they're supposed to be? Because right now I'm looking at it and like, I couldn't tell you really what the difference is between a normal walker zombie and a runner zombie. Runner zombies are supposed to be faster, but what does that mean gameplay-wise? Can they move and attack in the same thing? Is it only different because they get individual initiative as opposed to the walker group initiative, so they're just their own special thing, but otherwise just kind of walker zombies? How tough are brutes? How hard do they hit? And the stat things are for these adversaries are really, really simplistic. It's like, here's what their strength is, here's their toughness, here's their hit points, here's their attack type. But I don't have those 4 things that I need for each of those types of zombies. Only for the Abomination. Which is good, because the Abomination is going to be the most difficult to run, because it's got a whole bunch of special stuff that it does. So I needed that one, but I kind of also need the other stuff, and it's not in here. So it does make this adventure kind of impossible to play by itself. Like, I actually just can't run this off a page. If I didn't have the notice of preparing this beforehand and having already read through it 2 times, and by virtue of doing that, being able to probably deduce what some of this stuff is supposed to be, or at least close enough that it will probably work at the table. And it's not like you don't fight these adversaries in the adventure. You fight a lot of these adversaries in the adventure. The adventure is mostly combat. And you fight lots of adversaries. The first one that you... What is this first encounter? Let's do the first encounter. Look at the first encounter. A farmer in need. The horde counts 3 times as many walkers as there are survivors. So assuming that you had 4 survivors, you're playing with 4 players, then you're going to have 12 in the horde. No, sorry. The horde is the whole thing. The walkers are, again, this is why it's really interesting. It's like, are walkers individual or are they grouped enemies? Because that's actually mechanically important, which one they are and how damage is dealt to them and how they die or not. I would assume that the basic zombies are probably all considered one unit. So there are going to be 12 of them. So they're going to have 12 hit points, but they only have 1 toughness. They're super easy to hit. If they're groups, that means that you can overflow that damage just like you do something like Eve in D&D. So if you kill 1 and you do 4 points of damage to the horde, to the group of them, then 4 of them are going to go down because they each have essentially 1 toughness or 1 hit point. Hit points are actually a different thing mechanically in here, but for our D&D people out there, they have 4 hit points. Or each one has 1 hit point. And you get to overflow those. Then, so you have those 12 plus 2 runners and 1 brute. So it's like, even in the initial encounter, you're talking about putting, what is that, 15 monsters on the board? And all the combats are kind of like that. You fight a lot of undead. It's not like you come across them in like 1s and 2s. You're going to fight big chunks of them when you fight them. Including in the last one, the big boss fight where you fight the Abomination, there is also another horde of zombies in it. This horde of zombies counts 4 times as many walkers as there are survivors. So in this epic showdown at the end, let's say you had 4, so you're going to have 16 walkers, 4 runners, and 2 brutes, and the 1 Abomination. That's a lot going on. So anytime that I read that, I'm like, oh, these guys must be really easy to take down, or they're treated as a group, even though it's unclear whether they're considered a group or not. Does the horde constitute all of them being a group or not? I'm not sure. I don't really have that information. So it does make it difficult. But let's focus on some more positive stuff. It's in the game that I do like. One of them is the opening volley. So this is something that happens at the beginning of any combat in Plaguebearer, at which point you unleash an opening volley using a ranged attack or a combat spell with a range greater than 0. Choose a single enemy as your target and apply all hits to it. Roll shoot for a ranged weapon and cast for a combat spell. You're not able to like knock out the horde, but you can knock out like big targets right in the opening volley if you get a good roll. Once all survivors have resolved their volley, enemy, so that chooses each enemy as an individual, which means you don't get to roll over that damage to anybody else. So if you choose one of the walkers that only has 1 toughness, so 1 hit point, and you do 4 successes, that's great. You don't get to apply those 3 overflow things to any other walkers. It just goes to the 1. And so the opening volley is great. I like that. That's a cool way to open up any combat like that and be like, oh, here comes the horde. Everybody, let hell rain. rain free on them, rain it down on them. But there's also like cool characters, like I think it's the town guard, which when I read it I was like, wait, what? Because the town guard has a one-hand thing that has an area attack, and I was like, how does this work? Because they have charge is their primary talent they have on all the time. They can attack using a melee weapon as an opening volley. Then I'm like, but also one of the parts of the rules is like, okay, so but that's an area attack. So can I use it as an area attack in the opening volley so it doesn't follow the target one individual enemy rule or not? There's a lot of like fiddly little rule things in here where I'm like, I'm gonna have to make a lot of judgment calls when I run this, because that kind of stuff's not explicitly laid out. I assume that Plaguebearer will follow very much that D&D style of design philosophy where it's like, hey, anything specific overrides kind of the general rule. So if the general rule is you can only attack one thing, and you have a weapon that specifically says that you can do area attacks with it, then I assume that I can do the area attack as part of the opening volley, because that is a function of that weapon that's it differently, and I can only use it in this because I have the very specific talent that lets me do that. So it's fun. It feeds the fiction. It feels very much like, oh, you know, here comes the zombie horde, and everybody just fires weapons and stuff into it as they close, as the horde closes in on them. So I like that aspect of it. I feel, again, a lot of this is very thematic. It very much feeds the fiction of what we're talking about, like a zombie apocalypse in a Black Death era kind of setting. So all that works really, really well. Just some of it is so noodly and is not super well explained that I'm gonna have to make a lot of judgment calls. Again, maybe when the core rulebook comes out that they will address a lot of this stuff, but specifically in this one we have a lot of typos and missed things where it just makes a lower level of technical writing capabilities that we're just kind of struggling to, as a GM, I'm struggling to be like, how do I put these pieces together to make the whole image? Another thing that's also weird in here is that there are mentions in here of dwarves and elves and stuff. This entire one-shot is very humanocentric in that they are not mentioned at all in any sort of mechanical way. They are mentioned briefly in the background of the adventure, and all of our PCs are all human. So we've got Olga, the old hedge witch. We've got Rowena, who is the executioner. We've got Yusuf, who is the pilgrim. Brother Iratus, or Iratus. I assume it's Iratus. The zealot. Luther, the town guard. And those are our characters that we get to choose from. But they're all human. So there are mentions of fantasy creatures, and it does appear like fantasy creatures are a thing that you can play in the game. But this doesn't do a good job of setting that up. You know, like I wish it did a better job instead of showing us only humans kind of in the art and in the mechanics and in the gameplay. Because I feel like if we had that, that might be the difference maker whether somebody wants to pick up a game like Plaguebearer or not. Like, oh, cool, like fantasy medieval thing, but it's like, but if I kind of want to play like a Dwarven Hold or something like that, and be like, well, you know, looking at this, those rules don't really support that, so maybe I won't pick up Plaguebearer. So it would be nice to know that, like, if that's in the core game, that gets represented in something like art, so we know to expect that kind of thing. So in summation, I think here's our necromancer on the back. So he's one of the guys who has resurrected the undead from the Black Death and has created this plague of undeath around. Again, reasoning, why are they doing this? No idea. The gameplay does not seem to be particularly important, concerned with the why of the situation, more just like, how are you going to survive in this, which is fair. you're in a time and place where you're more focused on survival than necessarily trying to undo that situation or figure out why that situation happened. That's for people down the road who are not having to worry about whether I get to eat today or not in a situation, or whether an undead chews off my face while I'm asleep. So, summation for Plaguebearer at the end. What can we really say about it? It's hard to give it a sort of like concrete review, because I feel like I am, because of the technical writing issues and some of the stuff that's missing in here, it's like I don't have enough information to be able to even really figure out whether I would want to play this game or not, because I can't, even if I wanted to like sit down as a GM and kind of roll a fake session or roll a fake encounter and be like, okay, I'm going to use these characters and I'm going to try to set up this combat and just run it by myself just so I can understand how the system works. I don't have the adversary stat blocks, so I don't know if I'll even be doing it correctly. So it's really hard to kind of give it a straight up, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down kind of review style. Is this something that I want? It's like, because I don't know. I'm going to run it kind of specifically for this reason, just to see if I can maybe wing it. See if the play makes sense, if I can make it make sense at the table. And improvise to make it work. For you, if this is something you're interested in, is Plaguebearer going to be the sort of thing for you? Do you like zombie apocalypse games? Is that a thing that interests you? Is that type of media something that interests you? If the answer is yes, do you want to do one in a fantasy world? If the answer is yes, then you want to focus primarily on the combat. If the answer is yes, you know, Plaguebearer might be a fit for you. If you're like me and you want to do a little bit more of the like exploration aspect and a little bit more of like the resource management aspect of that, is it going to be for you? Probably not. I do want to kind of put it through its paces just to see how the combat works, as I'm interested in the combat system and kind of it uses zone combat. That's going to be fun to try out, but I think for me, it's probably not going to be a thing that I'm going to really be champing at the bit to play or run again. Even though it does have some stuff, like I want to pull this up at the very beginning of Night Hunt, it does say, hey, here's a special condition. Until the survivors find something to eat, all their actions are impaired, they lose 1 die, and they cannot take a short rest. So it does this cool thing where it's like, hey, if you don't have food, you can't take a short rest. Also, they make a distinction mechanically between food and water. The water being that if you take a sip of water, like a break and sip of water, you actually get to mark off some strain, which is good, so you get some of that resource back. But without your food, you can't take a rest. And not just a long rest like D&D, like you can't take a short rest to get a lot of your stuff back, which is not good. It kind of pushes you to have to go on this adventure to find it. And that's kind of the entire goal for the adventure is you come across somebody who's in trouble, you save them and talk to them, and they're like, oh, I know where there's a cache of food. Let's go get the cache of food. But it is in a dangerous area, so if you'll help me, I will let you guys have some of the food that I was going to get. So, for me, I would prefer to focus on something that's a little bit more exploration and resource management, but that's kind of a personal preference in games for me. And those of you who have been watching the channel for a while will be familiar with that. You'll know, you know that I, especially like watching me play the solo RPG, I'm very much in that exploration stuff where it's like, we're going to manage resources and we're going to figure out where we're going to go. And, you know, sometimes we're probably going to get lost, and there's going to be all sorts of random stuff that we didn't account for that might change the way that we do things. Have things like, oh, we were going to take the Rookland Ferry, which is a good example. And we're like, well, the Rookland Ferry is not something that we're going to be, we're not that we couldn't use. We're not willing to sacrifice what it takes to take the Rookland Ferry. Now we got to figure out another way across this big ass lake. All right, well, let's go down to the fishing village and see if we can hire some people. We hire some people. We get on the boat. We go out. We get attacked by undead who are who are under the water. We don't know anything about what's going on with that. Is there stuff going on with that? Yeah, I built the setting. I know that there's stuff under the lake, but my characters don't know that. And I don't know the extent of it. And then in the next day, you know, maybe a giant eagle swoops by and like grabs one of your fisherman guides and just carries them off. And you're like, well, what do we do now? So that's the style of gameplay I like. I don't think that Plaguebearer is gonna give me that. So other things you can look at for, you know, alternative recommendations. If you want something from the same publisher, if you want something else from Edge, we looked at a few different things from Edge. We'll back over real quick. We looked at Dungeons and Kittens, an afternoon outing if you're wanting something that's very, very cozy. But also, like, the background for it is a surprisingly awful, like, forced exile of children, which seems bad. Given impossible quests that they're supposed to complete. But it is very cozy. It was very fun. I was very impressed with a number of things about it when we looked at it. So that is interesting if you're looking for more stuff from them. Arkham Horror, I'm not really familiar with, but I mean, I played the board game. But for me, Arkham Horror is like... Arkham Horror feels like we have Call of Cthulhu at home. And like, but I could just play Call of Cthulhu. And I would probably play Call of Cthulhu. But they do have some other stuff if you want to check out some of that stuff. And I will say that Dungeons and Kittens was had a much better level of technical writing than Plaguebearer did. So this was obviously not all put out by the same teams. You don't have to worry about that. So if you're looking for something else. Something else that's a zombie apocalypse that's like fantasy themed, I'm sure there are some. I just can't think of anything that jumps to mind right off the bat. Which means I'm probably missing something very, very obvious. And I don't know what it is. But zombie apocalypse is something you can throw into anything. So if you wanted to do a D&D campaign, which is straight up D&D, there are tons of undead. You can make an undead themed campaign very easily. Again, there's Tomb of Annihilation, which is very undead themed, including lots of undead. And, you know, you fight a big bad undead at the end. Therak. So it's a fun thing, and you're trying to figure out how to keep yourselves from dying and a lot of other people from dying. So, hey, you can do that. Or you make your own homebrew campaign. You just pick an area, or you want to do Thay. Dead in Thay is a very popular old school adventure. Old-ish school adventure for D&D. If you're not familiar with Forgotten Realms, Thay, if you saw the D&D movie, that's where all the Red Wizards are from. There are a whole bunch of necromancers that live in Thay and run it. And they use a lot of like undead labor and stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of aspect, it's very easy to throw that into any system that's going to allow you to do undead or have horde mechanics. Like Savage World would be very easy to do that, and any edition of D&D is going to be very easy to do that, and certainly do that in Pathfinder. So it's just kind of like, if you want to run a fantasy game with undead in it, that's a very easy modification to make for you as the GM or Dungeon Master. You can do that, no problem. So, I think that's everything that we have to say about Plaguebearer. So I think we'll move on to All Bets Are Off. This is the layer, just show you very well. There we go. This is put out by Evil G. So Everyday Heroes, which is the system, All Bets Are Off. This is actually a standalone adventure, so it does not have the quick start information in it. And we'll talk about that here in a second, where you can find that and do all that stuff. All Bets Are Off is a free RPG Day starter adventure for everyday heroes. A perfect casino heist collapses when the getaway van disappears, forcing the crew into a high-pressure escape across the city using quick thinking, sharp skills, and improvised solutions as everything closes in. So that is what we're going to be looking at. One of the things that I like about this, or kind of my expectations when I was picking it up, look, when it comes to TTRPGs, about 90% of those fall into three very specific categories. It's either going to be some sort of medieval-ish fantasy. That's most of it already. That's probably 75% of it. And most of the rest of it, let's say the next, what is that? It's 75, so next 15% of it is going to be sci-fi. And then the last 10% is like period horror, where like Call of Cthulhu, which I mean, that covers D&D and Pathfinder and any of its D20 kind of ilk. It covers something like Starfinder, but also things like Traveler in our sci-fi side, as well as Cyberpunk, which falls into the sci-fi side. And then period horror is going to cover anything like Timber Room or Basin or Call of Cthulhu, and the many editions of Call of Cthulhu that are set in other periods. You have Cthulhu by Gaslight and Victorian space sci-fi, you can do that kind of stuff, and pulp adventure, which kind of falls generally within sci-fi because it usually has some sci-fi element to it, or a horror aspect of it. One of those two. So it's like when 90% of the offerings are basically those three types of things, I'm gonna jump at most opportunities to get a modern style adventure. It's like, hey, it's just people and they use guns sometimes, and they have cars and stuff, because there's not a lot of that. So I'm gonna jump at the opportunity to get most opportunities when those kind of things kind of come up, because they don't show up often. They are few and far between. Another thing that I like about grabbing something like this, which again is just an adventure, it doesn't have the quick start rules in it, is it's a casino heist. And because it's a heist mission, it means that that is actually an adventure that's very easy for me to skin and put in a different setting. So could I make it a period horror? Probably not. It's not really for that kind of game. But could I make it a sci-fi heist? Yeah, probably without too much difficulty. I could probably figure that out. And could I make it a medieval style fantasy heist? Yeah, I mean, we could definitely do that. We already have well-known heist adventures that D&D put out that we could look at for inspiration and look at how to like transfer something like this, because usually it's about just getting the whole adventure is getting from point A to point B, still being alive, still having the thing that you need, that you grab, that you need to carry with you in its own like kind of FedEx escort quest. And so it's just about movement and getting from one place to another. That's pretty easy to move into any type of genre or system. So I can translate a lot of that very, very easily, because we can just take this casino and set it in a spaceport, and that will work. Or we could do it and put it in, I don't know, Waterdeep. We put it in Waterdeep, and that would work. And then, like, I guess you could try to do like a. I would probably use like Call of Cthulhu as the system, and then if you strip out the cosmic horror aspects of it, you can do something like a Death on the Nile kind of thing, or you can just have somebody do a heist robbery in, let's say, like the 1920s, in I don't know, a speakeasy or something like that. So that would involve all the same elements that are in here, which has an organized crime element in it. So very easy to translate, and you could use differences. If you did not want to play Everyday Heroes, which we are going to talk about, but I am going to take a very short break where I'm going to go grab some more coffee, fill up on that. So you guys hang out for a second, and I'll be right back. Okay? Alright, I have returned. Continue. All bets are off. Drip of coffee on something important. That was not smart. Alright, drop it. Okay. It won't ruin that. And if it does, I'll just print it out again. Just a resource. I spilled it on my 1d20 GM Oracle. Not the greatest thing I could have done, but at least I didn't spill it on that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about. So I got kind of what I was expecting. Talked a little bit about what I was expecting. So let's talk about what All Bets Are Off actually looks like when we sit down and look at it. So I will tell you that the setup for this adventure is very similar to the TV show Leverage, which I don't know if you watched it. If you haven't watched it, they do a lot of heists. It's a heist show. And very similarly, in All Bets Are Off, you are playing as quasi good guys who steal from bad guys and give some of that money to people in need. But also keep a good portion of that money for themselves. Very much like the show Leverage does. So if you were looking for inspiration, you wanted to run more stuff like this, I would say go check out the TV show. There's like 6 seasons of it. There's plenty of stuff there that you can get inspiration for. And it's all, of course, modern day stuff, so it's all makes total sense. So, one of the things I will note is that this is an intro adventure, and there are no quick start rules. So the first thing you do when you open it up, and so I said there's a reason why I like the glossy map. Glossy page is because actually you get a full city block in here if you need to grid it out in case you want to use miniatures for your combats and whatnot. But on this first page, on the table of contents, you will see there's a QR code. It will give you access to the quick start guide, which pulls it up as more of a like wiki kind of style thing. But you also have to sign up for like their like side character thing to access it and actually be able to pull stuff from it, which I don't love. But you can also find on the website and a download of just the PDF. And after looking at the PDF, which I actually did go ahead and grab. Pull up the most recent one. Right here. Let's go here. Hit up here real quick. I'm not going to go through it because it's something I'm trying to do here. But this is the quick start for everyday heroes. But you'll notice, go through the table of content, that the appendix starts on page 70. But there's a lot of information in here. It tells you everything about like the introduction, how to create the heroes, your archetypes and classes, because it is a class-based system, and the core rules and game mastering and resolving everything. And so this is the quick start, not the full rules, but the quick start guide. And if it's already coming in at 70 plus pages, you start to understand why they did not include it in the quick start adventure, because publishing that would be an untenable cost for a company of this size. So one of the things that will come up is that you can get a free PDF download of those rules, but to do that you also have to get them your email address, which they don't say that they're going to send you marketing information for, but they are definitely, that's why they're asking for your email address. That is what they're going to do. So if you're concerned about that, I'm sure there are ways you could find access to this or not. Now, the great thing is, though usually in these quick starts, I would prefer to have the rules in them. But the nice thing about this is, actually, we can just go back right to where we were, is that if you're familiar with 5e or 5.5, the game's going to seem very, very familiar. And it says, oh, yeah, there are 5e differences. Overview of the major functional mechanical differences from 5e you will find in this quick start guide. So, Everything's been shunted down to 10 levels. And armor gives you the wearer a saving throw to avoid damage that would take them to 0 hit points. It doesn't affect how difficult a target is to hit. AC has been renamed to defense. That's very standard. I had no problems figuring that out. By the way, this is the first time I've looked at this. I had no problems figuring out that that's what that did. Interesting to know that the AV, the armor value, covered objects have an armor value between 1 and 5 that is used to see if attacks have a chance to defeat them. I don't know what that means. You roll a d6 for that? This is unclear as to armor value. Unclear. What does that mean? Character creations are, yeah, that's gonna be pretty straightforward. Breaking objects is armor versus penetration system, which, okay, so it's the penetration value is assigned to what? Okay, gotcha. All right, so all the weapon attacks in here have a PV, a penetration value, and so the armor also have an AV. So I guess if they hit the armor, then depending on those ratings, you will know whether you can dismantle that piece of armor and or destroy an object or not. Cool. Very straightforward. I understand that. No worries. Like, I'm looking in the back here. This one has a light ballistics vest. It has armor value 2, save +2, ballistic concealable. And they're going to have some equipment down here. They have a 9mm semi-auto pistol. 2010 +2. It has PV2. So I guess that means that you could use this attack to destroy the armor? Unclear. I say that questionably because this pistol specifically, and all the weapons do in here, like they said, they're kind of bad guys doing bad guy stuff, pretending to be bad guys, is that all the guns are using rubber rounds, and so it's like, well, it's not an actual like metal bullet, rubber round, so it's still gonna hurt like a mother when you get shot with it, and could still, you know, like hurt you quite a bit, but you know, probably not gonna break through a ballistics vest or sunder it in that kind of way. So I'm like, does that work since we're using different ammunition or not? I don't know. Probably not worth the question at this point. Obviously, they didn't include stuff about the penetration value and stuff in Quick Start, probably because they didn't expect that thing to kind of come up. But it does give you an insight as to different things. But all that to say is that, hey, if you've played 5th edition D&D, guess what? You probably don't need to download the Quick Start rules. Because, like they said, this is kind of the only differences in here. Assuming that you have players who aren't going to be trying to do things like break another character's armor, because that's not a thing you do in 5e. Probably not going to have any issues running them without even the Quick Start. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to be like, oh, this is just almost straight up just basic 5e mechanics. All the way down to like game terms like exhaustion levels and second wind actions are all in that. You don't really need to download the Quick Start rules if you don't really need that. Now, all bets are off. Styles itself, down here at the bottom, a cinematic adventure for the everyday heroes role-playing game. So we need to keep that in mind. That is the thing that they are trying to say this is, and that's the thing that we will be judging them whether they made that or not. And I think that that is relatively true based off of what they do. So, like I said, this is just one adventure. After kind of your hot start, you get dropped immediately into an encounter that you're going to have to deal with some security guards from the casino. And basically what happens is that you guys have done this heist and you're running out the front door with your sacks with the dollar bill signs painted on them, full of cash and money, even though it's, you know, a casino. And you're running out, and just as you exit the front doors, you see your getaway driver in their van just peel out in front of you and leave you behind before you can even put any of the money in it. So you have all this money standing on the street, and this is about, what do you do now? How do you get to your like safe location, your meetup location, which is apparently 20 city blocks away. So quite a bit. It's quite a ways away. So after you do sort of this first off hot start encounter that the group does, and the group really can't fail that encounter even if they get their butts kicked in here, there is a kind of like a saving grace that kind of comes in at the end that kind of causes the bad guys to relent. I won't totally spoil it, but just so you know that there is organized crime elements, and then there are some cops that are part of the organized crime elements, and then there are some police that are not part of the organized crime. So you kind of have this kind of three-way faction thing going on. You've got your people, you've got the actual city police, and then you have the organized crime that's behind the casino, and they're all trying to deal with you. And so everybody's invested in your player characters and what they're doing with the money at that time. So after you do that hot start, you get 6 different encounters, and they tell the GM is like, hey, you can mix and match these 6 encounters to make the adventure as long or kind of as short as you want across city blocks. The only thing that I wish that they had changed, well, let me tell you what the encounters are first. How about that? So the encounters are, there's one where you're running around finding your way through a maze of alleys and fire escapes, trying to avoid the main streets. There's one where you're cutting through a junkyard that has some guard dogs in it. There is a place where you get caught up with some police officers who stumble across you. There is a spot where you're running past and you run across somebody from a local business out in the alleyway who has stepped out of the back of their storefront, and now you have a bystander witness, and what do you do with them? And then you have a intersection that has a sniper nest that you have to deal with, and you have a police checkpoint that you need to get through. And so they tell you that you can put these in any order you want. The only thing that I wish they had changed is that in here they don't tell you this, but when you go and look at Keep Truckin', which is the last one I said, which is the police page, police checkpoint, the first thing it says right at the top of that is says, hey, important GM note. This encounter works best as the last encounter the heroes can overcome due to the possibility for them to gain access to a vehicle if they are successful. Because if they gain access to it, a lot of these other ones don't. A lot of the other encounters don't make sense anymore. I just wish that in the front where they're like, oh, you can use these in any order, they had said, hey, just letting you know, you should probably save this one to be the last one you run. So even if you don't run all of them, you probably want this one to be the last one, or maybe they do really well, maybe the next to last one, just so they can kind of bypass an encounter at the end. That would be probably my only note there as far as kind of the layout of the adventure. I do like that it's kind of mix and match, so that way even if you're a GM who decides that you want to run this like 2 or 3, that's the nice thing about, I love a good one shot or something like that, because it makes me want to use it over and over and over again. And if I do that, there's a way to kind of keep it fresh for myself and be like, oh, let me rearrange the pieces, so even if there are people who have played this before in my group, they're going to have to do it in a different order than they did previously. So it's not going to be quite the same. They're probably going to remember most of the stuff that was in it, but it's going to be in a different place. At least keeps it fresh for me as a Dungeon Master or Game Master kind of trying to run it. Though honestly, Dungeon Master is almost appropriate. Like we said, very, very close to 5e basic. So you'd almost call ourselves Dungeon Masters, except for that very, very specific kind of licensing issue. We can't do that. as you're going through this adventure, you have these 6 different encounters that you can potentially do. And that it's also nice is like if you want a short one shot that's only like 2 hours, you only do some of it too. So if you want to do that, then super easy to do. And one moment. All right, there we go. So I like that aspect of it, that you can change up a lot of things into it very, very easily. It does suck that like one encounter kind of always has to be the end encounter if you're going to use it, because if you do, getting your player characters off their feet and into a vehicle trivializes so much of the other encounters. That kind of sucks if you're not wanting to make more work for yourself to come up with new encounters put in there. Or if you give them a reason for why, if you had it at like one of the first encounters kind of forced a failure, that's also not great, but might work with this system a little bit more. Like I said, this is it styles itself a cinematic adventure, so it is kind of a, you go from one set piece encounter to the next set piece encounter to the next set piece encounter until you get to the end. And that's not a bad way to run D&D. In fact, I feel like today, contemporary D&D, that's how most D&D games are run. There's not a lot of meaningful choice into what the player characters necessarily are doing, but only in how they're overcoming whatever the obstacle is. Even that, sometimes you're kind of given that a lot of D&D. So it can be a little railroady in that sense, in the fact that you're not really given a lot of choice options. But I think for something like a one-shot, that's okay, especially for a new system where really the thing you're trying to focus on the most is trying to learn the system and enjoy running the system. And so the more stuff that you can pull out or make just happen automatically, a little bit easier. It also kind of makes it easier as far as like time frame. You'll have a much better idea of like how long things should take when you're setting up a one shot, which is nice, rather than very open-ended, when it's like, well, but if they decide to do something completely different, then that will utterly change how this adventure goes, and I'll have to improvise a whole ton of stuff. And that might take them 15 minutes, or it might take them 15 hours, depending on the type of group they are and what they decide to do. If I truly don't like kind of put up the bumpers on the bowling lane and kind of keep them on the straight and narrow, going down towards the railroad towards the end on the rails. So it's very on rails experience. Not bad, but your players aren't going to get a lot of meaningful choices out of it. I'm okay with that. The thing that would only worry me about that is that are other adventures that they put out also of that same format? Is that format indicative of the style of game that Everyday Heroes is? That's the thing that I don't get an answer for, and the thing that I would want an answer for, though, to try to tell me whether I'm going to be more interested in playing more of the system or not. Because if the answer is yes, and everything's kind of going to be these on-rail adventures, that's okay. It's not really my style. It's not a thing that I love to run and or even play a lot often. It's just not kind of my style, so it's probably not for me. But if you're the sort of game master who likes having those kind of things, or you run for groups where they don't do a lot of independent character-driven action, as opposed to having they follow the plot cookies that are set out in front of them, that sounds demeaning. I'm not trying to be demeaning. They're very different styles of play. So if you are a GM or a player who enjoys that style of play, this is going to probably be a lot more suited to you than I'm finding it would probably be suited to me. Otherwise, the actual adventure is not too much to write home about. It's not too specific. I mean, if I wanted to talk about other things that I liked in it, I like the art in it. I do think that pound for pound, its art is superior than what I would expect. A full illustration of all the masks. and I feel like they're all on style and on theme and on brand. That was one of the things when we were looking at Dungeons and Kittens, where I was like, this is a little weird. Like, most of these art styles work together, but there's also like 4 or 5 different art styles that they're using for art in this book, which is even weirder because most of it's done by one artist. So I was like, why is one artist using a whole bunch of different styles for one product? That is very weird. So a lot of it works out really well. Like, you get this close-up shot, which is, this is the one about the sniper, and you watch A's rifle round tear through a parking meter, which is a full action shot. A little something to toss in there. The only piece of art that I would say that I think is subpar would be this one. There we go. Which is our junkyard dog. I don't know. There's something about this illustration. I think maybe because it's head on, and that's why I don't like it. But I just look at it and be like, I don't know. It also kind of reads a little bit more like a bear than a dog at some points. I just look at it and be like, I feel like this one should have probably been a mulligan. Probably done something else. And I was so surprised at it that I went and looked up the artist, which is Sergey Plyarov. Sorry, I'm probably butchering that. Skylarov. Looked it up and then found like their artist station thing and a different image, a different illustration they did of a dog that is way better. So I'm like, is this even their illustration? They obviously understand the proportions of a dog pretty well. So different style, you know, different breed of dog, very much. And that one had more fantastic elements of it, but it was like that one, when I look at it and be like, oh, that's a dog. This one, I look at it, I was like, this is like somebody, I don't know, it's like they didn't have the right reference that they were working off of or something. I don't know, something about it's just weird. I can't really put my finger on it. Something about the proportioning, I think, kind of sets it off for me. Not quite sure why. But yeah, I think reasonably the one shot works. There's nothing super crazy about it. As you go through it, you tally up how many they have fail states in these encounters. How many of them did they fail? If they fail too many of them, they get the bad ending at the end. If they go above and beyond, they get the good ending. There's also an ending if in case they get knocked out or, you know, captured. What if they lose the money along the way? Stuff like that. Even though I don't think there's really a way for them to the money, that they were just expecting that, like, obviously people are going to try to take the money from them, and they would do that. Like, even in the encounter in which you can potentially use the money as a resource to overcome that encounter, it doesn't reduce the actual, you don't actually lose the money of the caper of the heist. So I'm like, I guess I could improvise. Obviously, a lot of these organized crime agents they're primarily to get the money back. So they might just do that. But that's very much as like, this would only, I feel like, come up if I was improvising that to come up. There's not really a lot of things in here that explicitly states that somebody's going to try to take the money from them, rather than just KO them and then probably take the money. Let's talk about things that kind of surprised me about this. So, one of the things that surprised me is really, really early on is right here. The little thing that says, what about my ego? That's EGO. That is an initialism. Or sorry, it's an acronym. Or Evil Genius Organized Play Program. So, Evil Genius, the producer of Everyday Heroes, the publisher, they have an organized play. And I was like, that's really cool. You don't see that from a ton of publishers. There's a lot of work to put together an organized play system, but they have one and they run events on it, like online events on it, and that's really cool. I was like, oh, that's super cool. It's always a great way to like get support as a game master with like adventures, or get in touch with like other people who have maybe been running the game for a little bit longer, or at least play under somebody who's run it for a little bit longer, and you learn more about the system through play. Like, I like that kind of stuff. It's really helpful. and also ensures that there's generally some places like, hey, if you want to play this game, there's a community that you can find that will help you find people to play this game with. So that's really great. I love the interior utilization of the grid map. I already talked about that. One of the things that I do think is like this, while this is cool to have this in here. Also, you know what? I think it could have used a truncated version of like a rules reference or something, like a 1 sheet or a 2 sheet kind of thing that we could have tossed in here about just how to do the absolute 5e style basic stuff, like how do you do a d20 roll and all that kind of thing. Like just to have those truncated stuff, or tell you about the things like the PV versus AV stuff that's like, how is this different from 5e? And stuff like that. It's like, I feel like that space might have been a little bit more utilized for that. But I also understand wanting to do miniature based combat, especially in a game like this. So, you know, there is no right or wrong answer there. They just made a choice. I wonder if maybe the other choice might have been better. Maybe for me, maybe for you, who knows. Ooh, one of the things that really I found surprising, speaking of the junkyard dog that we already took a look at, is let's look at the big blow up piece of art of it. So I found this surprising. That's our supporting cast. So supporting cast means these are the only stat blocks we have for this adventure. So we have technically 7 encounters, and only 2 of these, and only one of them actually, I think, has the dog in it. So all the other encounters, if it's any sort of combat, you're only dealing with this guy. The Syndicate Agent. Which is great. I love seeing things that are like, I'm a big proponent of reskinning stuff. I really love reskinning stuff. I do it all the time when I'm running things like D&D. Be like, oh, I need a monster of roughly this challenge rating. I can pick any monster as long as it kind of does the things that I need it to do, and it fits within that CR band. Sure, I'll use it, and as long as I can make use of like its special abilities for the most part. So, but that said, doing a full page spread for 2 stat blocks seems like a lot of wasted space in something like this. Like, I could have very much seen us would prefer to be like, what if we had 4 stat blocks instead of 2? As these syndicate agents are both used as the casino people, the casino security, and also the cops, and also somebody else, I think. Like the sniper and stuff like that. It's like, could it have been better if we had maybe had a few more stat blocks so I could have a fully different stat block for a police officer versus the syndicate agent that's used for maybe the dirty cops and the casino security and the hitman. It's like, I just feel like we could have made better, that space could have been better utilized to maybe make the combats a little bit more interesting. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of encounters where you're kind of fighting the same guy again and again and again. Which, that's one of the tough things about modern style games in general, is because kind of every encounter comes down to guys with guns. And so if you don't have a combat system that you really like, or a combat system that's really, really quick, it's going to get pretty boring pretty quickly. And I do think that this Everyday Heroes could fall into that category. Now, they do a lot of stuff, and we'll talk about that here a little bit when we look at some of the character sheets. But they do... It is sort of like, what if everybody was playing a fighter in 5e? You're like, well, I don't know how many champion fighters you played in 5e, but they can be boring. As somebody who has now playing a 9th level ranger in a very long campaign, where on most turns I'm like, I shoot my bow. Yeah, combat can be boring. Now that's not my team, and that situation is very different. We use a lot of extra stuff that's going on. It's actually not that boring. And actually, the boring stuff isn't that bad. I actually don't care about that. I'm like, it's cool. I still do a bunch of damage, and my turns go pretty quickly. And I get to watch my friends do their turns. But I am a different style of player. Some players play a character, and as soon as their turn's over, they basically go back to their phone or zone out or start thinking about other things or whatever. And they don't lock back in until their turn comes back up again. And we've all had that, played with that person's, and like then you have to explain everything that happened between their past turn and their current turn, and like please pay attention to the game that we're all playing together. But I am not that kind of player. I'm like, I want to see what my other friends are doing on their turn, and then as soon as we get about halfway through the initiative, I'm going to be like, now I got to start thinking about, okay, so this is how things have changed. What do I do on my turn? So I'm ready to go. And so I find other things to do that aren't attack sometimes. Or so I have a better understanding of what's happening on the combat field. But I can see a lot of groups being like, well, it is a little bit like we're all playing fighters, and that could be really boring really quickly. And especially if combat takes very long, though most of the hit point totals down here, now they are like first and second level characters, they don't have a ton of hit points, so it's not the biggest in the way. But I mean, like, they do have, I mean, they still have like hit points in like the teens and the 20s, so it's not too bad, but definitely starting to enter into that 5e area where it's like, sometimes it might just take time to whittle somebody down, especially if we miss a few attacks. So, I do think that there is more that we could do with the combat a little bit, but there's more stuff. We'll talk about it here in a second. Oh, I did want to point out this cool thing. It's over on Red Dot. I do like what they do here. They have this table. Okay, if you can't read it, we're going to talk about it. So it's got 3 columns on it. It has check result, information gained, and game effect on next saving throw. It's when they're trying to avoid the sniper. So you can use perception or investigation checks to try to like figure out where the sniper is and how to get around the sniper nest. And so it has a roll table. Depending on what you roll for those perception or investigation checks, you get different information. Like, if you roll a 5 or less, you have utter confusion, you don't learn anything, and you have disadvantage on your next saving throw, because I think they give you like dex saves rather than have them attack you. Yes. So that's if you roll 5 or less, so you rolled really badly. 6 through 10, you realize that something on top of one of the nearby buildings is taking shots at you, so you kind of have a vague idea of where their location is. You don't get any saving throw effects on that one. If you roll between 11 and 15, you realize there's a hidden shooter on top of the office buildings across the street. So, you know, it goes from you don't know what's happening, you realize that the bullets are coming down from the top of the buildings, you realize which specific building they're in, and that gives you the advantage to being able to like kind of normalize you being able to figure out where cover and stuff is, where to position yourself to be out of line of sight. And then if you roll a 16 or better, you realize exactly where the shooter is posted up, and know where to run to stay out of the line of fire, exempt from making the saving throw. So once you identify where they are, you can like fully, totally understand where they are. Now you know specifically how to move and hide so you don't get shot at, and you no longer have to make those saving throws to get past. It's really cool. Like I like having that info block where it's like, here's the roll you need to make, and depending on what you roll, both gives you different levels of information and gives you a very specific mechanical effect as to how you're going to perform in the next round. I thought that was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that. And I want to see more of that kind of stuff. And obviously this is very 5e related, so I'd love to see that kind of stuff in a lot more D&D style adventures, to be like, oh, here's a cool table that kind of gives you information of what you get at different levels of success or failure of checks. Very much put out in a very easy to reference area. A nice easy table to drop that in. Doesn't have to be like a whole bunch of information, just like the basics. Let's talk a little bit about the PCs. So the PCs are, I found them to be kind of surprisingly complicated. Like it says in the very beginning that, hey, this adventure is for like 4 to 5 first and or second level everyday hero style characters. So first or second level D&D style characters. Obviously, none of these guys have hit points in the single digits, so they all must be at least second level. I'm just making sure that I'm not talking out my butt. No, most of them have hit points in the teens, and a few have the hit points in the 20s. And they have that because they've taken like feats and stuff that give them abilities for that. So each one of these characters has about half a dozen talents, which is kind of a class ability plus any other abilities they would get, kind of like your species or ancestry or background elements that you would get. So each of them has about, because there's no spells, each of them have about half a dozen talents that they can use. Plus they get a number of feats. It seems like they get a feat at probably almost every level, depending on whatever archetype they take. But most of them seem to have 1 to 2 feats that they take. Actually, most of them appear to have taken 2. This one only took 1. A lot of them appear to have taken 2. And one of those feats includes ability score increase. So obviously there's a feat way that you can increase your ability scores in everyday heroes. And that's kind of the primary way you do that, I'm guessing. But you have a lot of talents, so let's just go through, let's look at clubs. The clubs is the first entry here, and each one of them is named after the suit deck. You can look on the cover. Faces they have, the mask they're using. You get it. Clubs. I used to win fights to survive. Now I survive to win fights. That's the kind of writing that we get for these characters. The streets were hard on clubs, but it's made them tough and ready for anything. Recruited from an underground fighting ring by the Charity Sisters. Those are your benefactors. Clubs is the muscle for the stacked deck. Heist team. That's the name of our team. They are strong. They are an MMA fighter. Their background is orphan. Their profession is trades. They have a wealth rating, which is very familiar for anybody who's played like a World of Darkness game, or I think Call of Cthulhu does that as well. Wealth ratings. Savage Worlds does as well. Which is like, instead of figuring out like how much actual money you have on you, it's like, oh, you have generally this much walking around money. Stuff that you can buy pretty easily. Which is just an easier way to do it. You've got a defense of 14, that's instead of your AC. You've got armor, light ballistic vest, which has that armor value of 2 and a save plus 2. And it is ballistic and concealable, as its traits. They have 25 hit points. Their hit dice are 2d10. So it is interesting kind of going into is like, okay, how do they get to 25? It's like technically you can get there because they get bonus hit points. That's one of the feats that this character has taken. Their hit dice are 2d10, so they're a second level character, obviously, and they have a speed of 30 feet. They have a +3 strength, nothing in dexterity, a +3 con, a 0 intelligence, 0 wisdom, and a +1 charisma. They have basic equipment proficiencies, saving throw bonuses for strength and dexterity. And their skill proficiencies include arts and crafts, endurance, intimidation, mechanics, and streetwise. And they have athletics expertise. Talk about their talents. So talents are kind of the big things, as like your class abilities plus things that would otherwise be covered by spells and stuff like 5e vanilla. Survivor. You can reroll one failed saving throw. You cannot use this feature again until you finished a long rest. The things I wish that the character sheets did is have some sort of like checkbox or something that I could make that check on. But they do not include those. Handy. Parentheses, construction. You gain advantage on intelligence checks for activities performed in the practice of being a construction worker. Is their trade. They have that profession trades they have. Reckless attack. You guys have played 5e, you know what reckless attack is. It's the barbarian thing. But they don't have to rage to do it. So I guess technically as barbarian you don't have to. You just get it. But you probably should rage and do it. Heavy hands. The damage from your unarmed strikes improves by 1 die step from 1d4 to 1d6. In addition, when you get... there's a typo here where you get way too many spaces and trong. So there's clearly supposed to be something in here that has gotten effed up in the edit. Hero power attack. Talent at 2nd level. You can use it when making offhand unarmed strikes. The damage bonus is +5 instead of +10. So unfortunately we got a typo in there, so I don't know what that means. You've got pin. If you currently have an opponent grappled, you can make a special attack roll to pin them. No attack roll or ability check is required. Success is automatic, so that's really cool. You can immediately kind of put somebody on the ground and restrain them. Submission move. If you have an opponent grappled, you can perform a special attack called a submission move. This attack automatically hits and deals the same damage as your unarmed strike. You cannot use your power attack talent when making a submission move. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. Power attacks is the next thing that's coming up. Special attacks can be used in place of any attack you could normally make. Okay. So if you do submission move, you can also do pin. Unclear. Power attack. Before making an attack roll with a melee weapon, you can take a -5 penalty on the attack roll to gain +10 bonus damage if the attack hits, which means that when you do most people do like a d4 plus their strength when they do an unarmed strike, you can do a d6 plus 10 in addition to what everybody else could do. So essentially you're going to be doing like +11 damage most of the time. So your punches hit like a freight train. You cannot use power attack if the attack was made as part of a bonus action with a thrown explosive. Yes, surprisingly, you cannot power attack with a grenade. And you also can't use it when you use reckless attack. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. And you cannot use power attack with any attack that does not require an attack roll. So any like the ones like the pin or submission rolls that automatically succeed, you can't use them. Their feat is healthy. They get bonus hit points. That's already been included. We don't know how many. Their attacks. They have a heavy revolver, 6 rubber rounds, and takes an action to reload it. Range 100, 200. Attack +2, damage 1d10, ballistic, PV 3. Properties, less lethal and loud. I'm guessing that less lethal probably means you KO enemies instead of immediately kill them, if you want to. And loud means, hey, it's going to draw a bunch of attention. Big, like, 45 revolver. And unarmed strike, wait, yeah, +5, 1d6, +3. Bludgeoning, PV 1. Properties, finesse. Interesting. So unarmed strike is finesse weapon now. That's cool. That makes sense. I can see doing light strikes, using jabs versus like hooks or crosses. Yeah. And then you have your equipment, which is like your clothes, and here you have in your pocket, which is pocket stuff, the stuff that most people would have in their pocket. So if it's reasonable that a person would have it in their pocket, you probably have it in your pocket. I like that. That's very, it's got that very sort of like E100 skill based check kind of thing where it's just like, you have like random stuff in your pocket. So if you want keys in your pocket, yeah, you probably have a set of keys in your pocket. Now, do you have the specific keys for the store? No. But if you need keys for some reason, you could have them. You have an all-in-one pocket tool, like a multi-tool, a shoulder bag of cash, and transfer vouchers. That would be the money you're stealing. And your weapons, you have that heavy revolver, and it says years of fight experience. Apparently, is a weapon. So it kind of gives you an idea of how these characters are going to play. It's very, very much 5e. Right, all the way down to power attack and having a better unarmed strike and getting reckless attack. But also cool things like the survivor thing or getting the handy thing to make like skills a little bit more important for how you might be able to use them. So yeah, I mean, I like a lot of that. So what is kind of my overall summation of All Bets Are Off? I guess you don't want to say anything about... No, I already went over kind of like what you get in the... They have little like boiler text. It's nice because these characters are apparently recurring kind of in that ego playing and how you can mix things into that and like the organizations that are going on with that and their like official play organization. That's really cool. So like I just gotta be really honest about All Bets Are Off is that this is mostly a very competent adventure. Besides the kind of like one typo I stumbled over when we were reading through that. I think that might be the only typo I saw in here. These free RPG Day stuff is pretty well known for most of them have some typos in them. You read through them. So this one I think only has the one. It's one of the better ones. Maybe I'm forgetting something. I don't think so. So what I think it is incredibly competent. It's like, I don't know what to say about it because it's Dungeons and Dragons 5e. So if you like Dungeons and Dragons 5e and you want to play it as dudes with guns, here you go. It's incredibly competent, but it is not particularly, I would say, particularly inspiring. There's nothing about this that means like, oh man, I really gotta play this. It reminds me of, I took this and showed this to one of my DM friends after I got it, and he picked it up and he was like, oh yeah, because he's very much like a modern, he's a bit of a gun nut kind of guy, and he was like, oh cool. He opened up and flipped through it, and then kind of was very milquetoast about it after he read through it, and I was like, yeah, that kind of gels with my experience of it. It's like, it's incredibly competent, but it doesn't do a lot of inspiration. It's nothing that's like, oh, I gotta play this thing, or oh, this does something so weird and so different from the normal thing that I expect. Because it is D&D 5e, and I've been playing D&D 5e for over a decade now. So, and you know, I'm really familiar with the system kind of like inside and out. There's not going to be a lot of surprises in here, or a lot of things, even little tweaks to the rules. So a lot of this can feel a little bit like TTRPG, like Heartbreaker. Like, this is a thing that you put out that people are like, oh, this is my specific hack of D&D 5e, and put it out and be like, hey, yeah, but it is, at the end of the day, mostly already another better, well-known game that I already know how to play. It's just kind of taken and given a different coat of paint in the genre. So really the question is like, do you want to play 5e in a modern day kind of game without elves and dwarves and dragons, all that stuff? Do you like the system and you just want to use the system to play something else? And you know what? I think that's the perfect, maybe this is absolutely, Everyday Heroes is exactly what you're looking for. By that I mean, you have maybe a stubborn D&D group that you really want to try something new with, or maybe somebody else in the group wants to try something new. maybe if you're not the dungeon master or game master of that group, and they're like, guys, I keep bringing this stuff, like I want you to play different systems and try out some new stuff, like I'm getting tired of running D&D or whatever it is. You're like, I just need to mix it up and do something new. If that's the case, you know, this is such an easy thing to say yes to. So you're not going to be surprised by anything. There's no revelations in here as to a new system. Like, would I certainly run it as a one-shot? Yeah, sure. I'm already very familiar with 5e, and I overall quite like 5e, so translating that to being dudes with guns is pretty easy. And I like it because it's a system I already understand and I already know the DCs of very well, and if that's the case, it makes it very, very easy for me to translate that to a different system or a different genre if I want to, because I already know that system in and out because I've been playing it for so long. At this point, it's like, well, yeah, that'll be super easy to translate over. I know that game system in and out. What I do think happens is that everyday heroes, not necessarily this adventure, but everyday heroes in general, and pull up the website. We might as well pull up the website. I think that I do want to show some stuff off about the website. Go ahead and do that. It disappeared. Where did it go? There it is. There you go. I said, I think Everyday Heroes really addresses one of the biggest problems with the TTRPG space as like a hobby today, which is how do you get a group of D&D players to dip their toes into the greater ecosystem of RPGs and everything that it has to offer. It's like, how do you take people who have known and loved and played D&D 5e or 5.5 and get them to try something else? And I think you do that by making the smallest possible baby step into trying something new, because it addresses the biggest turnoff that I think a lot of groups push back on, whether it's a dungeon master or another player, when they're like, hey, I want to try to play a different system. And that is learning a new TTRPG system to competency to play like 4 hours of a one-shot. Like 3 to 4 hours of a one-shot. And you're like, that's a big ask to try to like get everybody on board to learn a system, especially because if your background is 5e D&D, and be like, that system, I've played with people who have been playing the game for a long time who still don't necessarily know the rules super well of 5e. And that's not shade, but it's like, it is kind of an overall issue. It'd be like if you have somebody who's been playing this game for, let's say, 5+ years, and they're still confused about like how sneak attack works. I think I've certainly told this story before, that I played with a guy for so many years through multiple editions of D&D, but certainly through D&D 5e, and be like, primarily played rogues almost exclusively, and after many years of playing rogues almost exclusively, still did not know how sneak attack and backstab works. And I'm like, you gotta know that, my guy. You've been playing essentially the same character for years. How do you not know how to do the one thing the rogue does in combat? You have to have memorized this just from doing it so much. It should basically be muscle memory at this point. But that is one of the problems. So that's a huge turnoff if that's your background, and when you're like, I played this game and I still don't feel like I understand this game, and now you want me to try to learn a different game that I'm going to play like once? Yeah, that's good. It's a hard sell. That's a really hard sell. And it's really difficult for people who've been in the hobby for a while, like myself, like pre-5e been in the hobby, which sounds wild to just be like, oh, just pre-5e? No, I've been in a hobby for a long time, but as far as when the contemporary state of the hobby, it's like, I was playing RPGs before 5th edition came out. Before the play testing, which I also was a part of before 5th edition came out. I've been playing it for a long time now. And when you do that and be like, I have played so many different systems and learned so many different things from all those systems, and I truly love TTRPG. Like, obviously my favorite hobby at this point, that I really love doing it. It's a great way to spend time with friends. It's a good way to use your brain, practice math skills, language skills, socializing, all the good benefits that kind of come out of TTRPGs. Like, so much of it's so good for us as humans. And having that and being like, I am a pro gamer, and knowing that learning TTRPG systems is like learning languages. And the idea that like each one that you learn, like the second language you learn, second system you learn, will always be the most difficult system. Because you already come in with an established perspective of how TTRPGs work, but your point of view is so limited as to how they function. Like, if all you've ever played is D20, D&D 5e system, 5.5 system, and you're like, hey, by the way, here's a dice pool system, and this game plays totally differently. And you're gonna be like, what do you mean we roll all these dice? And what's my modifier to it? You don't get a modifier to it. It's just however many successes you get. And like, well, that's way different. Yeah. But once you learn that second one, and everyone you learn after that, you're like, oh, you start seeing these through lines of design through all of them. And it's like, oh, when I pick this up, like when I picked up All Bets Are Off, and I opened it, because nowhere in here does it say it's based off of 5e, which is a weird thing that it does. It doesn't ever tell you like, oh, by the way, this is part of 5e. But the first thing is like, after you get through, like, I know I'm reading the adventure backgrounds, like All Bets Are Off is an adventure that should take a team of 4 to 5 first and second level characters, roughly 2 hours to play through. And I'm like, okay, that tells me kind of how long an encounter takes. It also tells me like the level of power these characters get. But I was gonna be, where is it? I'm trying to think of like the point in which I realize is like, oh, I know this system. And it's pretty much gonna be the first time that we introduce any sort of check in this. Yeah. If the heroes choose to outrun the security, they will need to succeed in a DC 14 Strength Athletics or Constitution Endurance group check. It's like, as soon as I read that one sentence, I'm like, oh, this is D&D 5e. I look at the DC level and be like, yep. Look at the ability, parentheses, skill, proficiency. Yeah, alright, so this is a D&D 5e based thing. Now, somebody else who's maybe not familiar with it would be like, oh, that's just light D&D. Like, no, it is D&D. It is D&D 5e. And so knowing that, but also like being able like, oh, but it's also going to do some different stuff. So knowing that maybe initiative works different. It doesn't in this system. But if we looked at some of the other stuff, like Plaguebearer stuff, and you're like, oh, this is very reminiscent of this other system I've done. Or I know another system that uses card-based initiative. Or so I understand what this is doing and how that plays. So every TTRPG you learn after that second one makes it way easier to learn TTRPGs, where I can sit down and be like, oh yeah, I could probably run. Look, guys, I don't have the stats for the bad guys for this, and I'm like, I can probably run this. I think I can probably figure it out. It's probably not going to be that hard. I've played enough TTRPGs. I've read this through twice. It's like, I'm pretty sure I understand the design of this game pretty well. I think I can probably wing it. I'll probably sit down and jot out the notes so I don't have to improvise them in the moment, and give myself, 5 to 10 minutes of kind of like reading it over and being like, does that make sense? Should I make it a little bit higher? Should I make this number a little bit lower? That's probably in the ballpark, and go from there. So by getting that person to the ability to be able to do that, you have to get them off from being a mono TTRPG, a D&D only kind of person. And so that's where I think that Everyday Hero sits in this cross, where it can be really useful for the TTRPG community. It'd be like, what if I could just give you 5e, pretty much straight 5e, in a different setting? And then maybe if you like that and you played more of it, because they got a lot of stuff. Look at the website here, and look, they only do one thing. These guys only do one thing. They only do Everyday Heroes. So if we look at the games down here, you go, okay, everyday heroes, intergalactic heroes, which is going to be everyday heroes but sci-fi, military heroes, which is everyday heroes but like a Call of Duty essentially. You've got the armory, obviously that's going to have weapons in it. You've got the garage, obviously that's going to have vehicles in it. You've got the vault, which is going to have something in it. Oh, this is like all the new stuff. This is where you're going to get the mech stuff in it. Mutant Warrior, mod yourself with cyberware. So it's what this book does is the Vault's taking all the stuff. Yeah, it's a compilation of all the other stuff. So a lot of the stuff, because we get down into adventures where it's like, oh, they have a lot of licensed stuff. So if you really like 80s and 90s like action adventure sci-fi flicks, you're probably gonna like this system, especially if you're already familiar with D&D. Where you've got Escape from New York. That one up. Okay. Love the image of it, of having the Statue of Liberty down there. So you can play Snake Plissken if you want to. They've got The Crow, Pacific Rim, so they've taken those rules that were very specific to these places and moved them into that vault book. Because Pacific Rim's obviously going to have their mech rules in it. So all these adventures just use the everyday hero stuff and then add a little extra spice to make it more like this licensed setting. Kong Skull Island, which is very interesting because, like, is this going to be, obviously, look at this, this is going to be roughly modern day then. So it's not going to be like something that's set in like the 20s, like the original Kong film. We also get Highlander and Total Recall and Rambo and Universal Soldier. So if you like those kind of like big, beefy bicep 80s 90s action stuff, it's going to have lots of cool stuff for you in here. Lots and lots of cool stuff. So if you have a play group who's like interested in that stuff, or at least some of them are interested in it, and you can be like, hey, you guys want to play this with basically a system you already know? And they'll be like, yeah, that was fun. I wish there was more stuff like this. Oh, like this. We can definitely find more stuff that's like this. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff in here. I think this really holds a very important space in the hobby where it can be really, really useful, is what I'm trying to get at. But, you know, there's lots of games that do this if you aren't looking for a D&D 5e, which is totally fair. And if you're like me and you've played so much D&D 5e and you're like, hey, anytime I get an opportunity to play not that is nice, because I play with two groups in which we main primarily 5 and 5.5. So an opportunity to not play contemporary D&D, just to play something different, just to cleanse the palate, the amuse-bouche, if you will, is really nice. We have Modern Age is one of the ones that I would show off. You want basically the same thing with different things. I think I'm gonna, yeah, Modern Age. I do. It appears I do. No. Not that. Stop it. Okay, click off of it first. There we go. Modern Age. Modern Age is nice. It uses a 3d6 framework. And it uses a very interesting stunt mechanic, which is when you roll doubles or triples. Well, doubles, technically. There you roll doubles. Let's see if we can find this stunt chart quick. It's... yeah, here's some stunt tables. Wait, stunt tables? Yeah, these are all background. Some actual gameplay stuff. Taking action. Oh, we should be in there. There we go. Here's the big page of stunts. So you got basic general combat stunts at the top. Anytime that you roll doubles, you also roll one of the 3 dice, you roll a different color. And whatever, so if you roll doubles, then whatever's on that die is how many stunt points you get, and you can use whatever table goes with that action. It allows you to do stuff. So it's basically critting, but instead of critting, just doing extra damage, you get to do cool stuff with it. Like if you were doing the basic firearm stunts, and let's say you do this one, you're like, I lay down suppressive fire because I have an automatic weapon. You pepper an area with bullets. If anyone, friend or foe, stands or moves within Gritty 1 or Pulpy 3 at like what range of your target was positioned when you attacked between now and your turn, you roll a new attack against that individual. So you basically lay down like an area of effect, kind of cone in that area. I mean, like, hey, if anybody moves into that area, they also potentially get attacked. So it's really great if you like injure a bad guy, maybe somebody needs to render aid to that person. If they do that, roll into there to do that, then you also get to make free attacks on them when that happens. Lots of cool stuff. So have those kind of like extra things. Some of them will sometimes let you like rapid reload. Next time you miss with a firearm, immediately reload without checking against capacity. Overwatch, your opponent suffers -1 to attack rolls per stunt point spent until your next turn. So if you have 3 stunt points, you can just pump those into there and be like, the opponent suffers -3 to attack roll until my next turn. And that's super powerful when you're rolling with a 3d6 system. It just very much kind of gives you kind of a curve of where you're trying to hit. So Modern Age is very cool. It also comes with fantasy and sci-fi flavors. It was originally the Dragon Age RPG. I'm sure I've shown these off before. There. Back there, it might not be. Oh. There's one of the books. I don't know which one I'm grabbing. There we go. That's a quick start. Okay. But there's an old Dragon Age RPG. So first it's put out by Green Run. It was first put out as Dragon Age RPG, and then they made a generic version of it, Fantasy Age, which I also have. But lots of fun. Totally different system. It's good if you're already in a group that very much likes a D&D style game. You can move over that. If you got players who really like Dragon Age, you can play the Dragon Age game too. The only problem with the Dragon Age game is it came out after the first Dragon Age Origins game, which only has like 4 different types of enemies in it, so that is kind of a detriment. You're going to run a lot of very samey combats. An issue which luckily later editions of the Age system and different iterations have fixed. That's nice. Other things, Savage Worlds. Always going to promote Savage Worlds if I get an opportunity to. Genre neutral, skill based game. With dice explosions, you use the whole classic 7 style of dice. Very easy to learn. It's pretty simple to run. Allows you to do a lot of stuff very easily. And then there are templates that allow you to do very specific types of settings if you want to do that. So if you want to do pulp, if you want to do modern, if you want to do Victorian sci-fi, which is a thing that they have. 1881? Victorian space? Something like that. As well as if you want fantasy, there's lots of stuff that you could do with. As well as Deadlands, so if you want to play Weird West, they do that too. Fate. Fate's very gender neutral, genre neutral. Genre neutral. Versatile system, it uses fudge dice, which are d6s that have pluses and minuses on them. You can also just use standard dice with it, but honestly it's easier if you get the fudge dice. It'll make things a lot faster. Fudge dice are relatively easy, hands-on. They don't cost too much. It really shines for like one-shots and short campaigns. The nice thing about it is it doesn't have like an ironclad skill or proficiency system, so you can kind of make up the skills that you need for the game as you need them. Very cool. That's very much a Fate thing where it's like even when you're making a character, you can leave empty spaces on your character sheet and fill them in later while you're playing. I think like Kids on Bikes does a very similar kind of situation too, where they kind of do that. It's like, yeah, you don't have to figure everything out at character creation, which is a nice way to create a character when you're like, I haven't sat down and played this character at the table yet, so I don't know what they need, and I don't know like in the RP who this character might end up being. Because sometimes you make a character and you sit down and you start playing with a group and you're like, group dynamics different, the game style is different than I was expecting. It's like, so some of the stuff that I took for my character, both like the role playing and mechanically, maybe doesn't make a ton of sense, and maybe I need to tweak some of that and talk to my game master or dungeon master about that. I try to have those conversations with my DM. If I sit down and start playing a character and be like, look, I have this ability that's like core to my class that I never use. Is there something I can swap this out for to get something that's maybe more useful for our campaign? We did the level up of my homebrew ranger last week, and I was like, that was a big part of it. It's like, look, we're not going to play an adventure where a ranger gets to do a whole bunch of like exploration, wilderness survival stuff, and if that's the case, that's fine. I'm playing the ranger primarily to try out this new beastmaster aspect thing going on, so I've got a different thing with it. So it's like, can we just swap out stuff? And also stuff like dwarven weapon training, which was the thing that I had, and I was like, I don't need that because I already get trained with all martial weapons and armor because I'm a ranger. So can I swap this out for something that's maybe more useful, where instead of double dipping and just kind of like losing cool stuff about my character? Luckily, I have a dungeon master who's actually both my dungeon masters I play with right now are very, very open to that kind of stuff. Because usually I come with and be like, can I swap it out for this? And I try to pick something that's generally equitable. I'm not like just gaming the system most of the time. But that's Fate. And then basic role playing, which is the Chaosium. That's the same D100 skill based system that's behind Call of Cthulhu. It is a general basic role playing system. You can go get some of it for free from Chaosium. Chaosium's been around for 50 years. They're almost as old as D&D. So, like, just within a few years of D&D. So, give it a try. I would also say, because it's the oldest game that we're mentioning, it's got the most support and the most stuff for it. And you can definitely use that to play modern games, and there are many iterations of it. So, go give it a try out. See what you think. Overall, between these two, you know, what did I like? Which one did I like the best? I don't know. Plaguebearer has a lot of interesting mechanic stuff that I really like, that I'm really interested in tucking into and seeing if I can figure out. There's also the interesting aspect as game master being like, can I just make this work when I have so many question marks about the game? Like, that's why I'm going to try to run it. Be like, can I do it? And do I have enough information that I can deduce the rest of the game and figure it out and be able to improvise a system that I don't really know and I have no reference for, except this document? Like, can I do that? So there's a lot of stuff that's cool there, and I like that, and I want to check out more of that. But I also don't think it's going to be a long-term game. This, all bets are off. Like I said, usefulness for me is going to be this ability that I will have this casino one-shot already, like, heist locked up, and then I can port this to all sorts of different systems and different genres if I want to. So anytime that I need to run a one-shot, let's say I'm playing like I'm running like a, I don't know, I mean, I guess I could say like a Traveler game. I don't know, I don't know Traveler well enough nearly to run it. But let's say I was running a Traveler game and they were hanging out in the spaceport, or they needed to wait for something else to happen. And so I needed to come up with something that was happening kind of in the middle of a campaign I was running and be like, oh, I could take this. I can absolutely swap out all the trimmings on it, all the details, all the color, all the like all the stuff that's in here, and make this into a Traveler based heist. Like, I could do that probably pretty easy. And that would be a lot easier than trying to come up with that one shot from nothing. Be like, okay, you guys have gotten the plan, you've got everything done. We understand that, and like, I might have them make some checks for like research and stuff like that. But the focus is really going to be the heist going wrong at the end, not actually trying to get in and pull off the heist to begin with. So it was really, I might use something like that. Like, you tell me the checks to tell me about like maybe how difficult these are going out the backside, where I might be able to adjust some stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's it. I think we're good at this point. thanks again for hanging out with me. It's always fun. Like I said, RPGs are my favorite hobby, and I love to talk about them. So, hopefully, this guys give you some insight about both of these systems, Everyday Heroes and Plaguebearer, and you got an idea whether you're going to be interested in either one of these or not. Like I said, most of the time you can find these for free download on the publisher's website or through something like DriveThruRPG if they host them there sometimes, .io. You poke around, you should be able to find them. Most free RPG Day people put their free RPG Day stuff up as like a PDF download, usually for free, and oftentimes within days. But you'll have to check to see if it's online. I did not check to see if ones were online, except for the Plaguebearer one, because I checked specifically to see if they had adjusted the page number one. So I do know that that one is available online and you can find it. Otherwise, other things that are happening. Saturday, we're going to jump back in. We're going to do a stream. We're going to do the solo RPG thing. We are beyond the borderlands now, so we're into the wilderness now, trying to figure out a base of operations for Reed as his Landlita, as he tries to carve out his new fiefdom in this borderland area and try to figure out where's the best place for that, and then set up camp and then see if the locals are friendly or not. They probably won't be, since we're doing just a little bit imperialism, just a little bit of expansionism, just being a little bit of a bad guy. Not a terrible guy, just like a little bad guy. It's not that. So we're gonna do that on Saturday. So jump in and watch that if you want. If you've never seen somebody play a solo game, this is 5e game, by the way. I guess technically 5.5. You can jump in and catch up with us. There's also a playlist over on the channel on YouTube at RedRaggedFiend if you're watching on Twitch, where you can also go through all of that and you can see me setting up the stuff and catch up with us, because this is going to be session, wow, this is going to be like session 12, I think that's right. We're going to be playing, so we're very close that our character might get a level very soon. I'm very excited. He really needs it. He's almost died too many times for comfort. So I'd really like for him to get that level. That would be really nice. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. If you like this content, if you want to course that stuff, follow us over on Twitch, subscribe over on YouTube. There's also the blog, RedRaggedFiend.com, where you can go read a whole bunch of stuff, and we have stuff up on DriveThruRPG if you want to get some say what you want stuff over there. All that stuff's down in the description if you want that over on the YouTube. Otherwise, that's it. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys, and I'll see you. All right? Bye.